All right, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to our annual Pesach preparation seminar. It's so nice to see all of the faces that are here, and Chevra who have your cameras on. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. For those who don't, okay, I don't appreciate you as much, but I understand that everyone needs their privacy or wherever you might be driving or whatever you're doing. So thank you for being here also. B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. The famous saying of our rabbis, En Bet Midrash B'lo Chidush. There's no such thing as a house of study that has no chidush, that has no novel idea that comes out in it. And so when people ask me why every year do we teach the same halachot over and over and over again, we learned this last year, it's the same if you watch the video from 2021 and 2020 and 2019 and 2018 and you go back, all of the videos, they're pretty much the same thing. And so I'll tell you, the first answer is there's no such thing as a group of people that sit down to study Torah together, and there's nothing new that comes out in this Bet Midrash. The second is because review is one of the ways in which we acquire the Torah. The Mishnah says, Shanu Rabotenu, our rabbis reviewed their studies. What does reviewing their study mean? Many people are used to this style of, I learned something once in high school, I took a course once in university, I took a class once at the synagogue, but what about reviewing the things that we studied? Review is very important. Review is important, and that's why we review things that we study all the time. And the third, when I received my ordination from Mori Harav Yaakov Peretz on the laws of Chuppah v'Kiddushin, so some of my friends wanted to be shochatim, some wanted to be mohalim. I don't love blood, I don't like cutting things, I cannot handle, I have a cognitive dissonance between the fact that I eat animals and the fact that I can't handle killing them, so one day hopefully I will bridge the gap. Not that it will kill them, but that I maybe will stop eating them. But for right now, this cutting off a chicken's head never did it for me in any way, so I decided to take other courses, and one of the areas I zoomed in on were the intricacies of the laws of Chuppah, Kiddushin, marriage, and Ketubot, the contracts that we signed by the wedding. And after I finished, Harav Peretz told me that it's very important to review these halachot as often as you can. The reason? It's kind of like when astronauts go to space. If you don't use it, you lose it. Chuppah v'Kiddushin is not something I do every day. Yeah, I do weddings every once in a while. But every time before I do a wedding, I sit down and I review all the halachot that have to do with weddings. Because it's not something I do every day. It's not something I do every Sunday. It's not something that I'm doing all the time. And because of that, there are little details that you don't remember, and it's time to sit down and review those things. And the same thing with Pesach. Yes, you keep kasher the whole year. Yes, many of the things we're going to speak about today are relevant to the whole year. But some of them are really only relevant once a year. And some of them we didn't think about last year. So it could be 3 years since we last thought about it. We haven't had guests since before COVID or whatever it was. And because of that, it's important not just to review, but especially to review the things that we don't always do. We don't always practice all the time. Before I say anything, I want to give a great shout out to my moderators, Rav Yitzchak Shem Tov, Liba, and the newest moderator, Rav Tzvi Holt. If you've been part of our Pesach forum and you see the questions that are flying in there, and I don't even get a chance to get to the questions before they're already helping answer them, I wouldn't be able to do anything that I do for Pesach without them. And to my wife, who right now is in the middle of a important meeting and her upcoming graduation of her PhD. B'ezrat Hashem will be in New York sometime in May. She'll be finishing her PhD. And without her, I wouldn't be able to do anything that I do, not just for Pesach, but in my whole life. So I want to say thank you to them, and of course to all of you. And Melech Beloam, it's impossible to be a spiritual leader if there's no one to lead, and I'm grateful to all the people who come and learn with me and study Torah together with me, and I'm grateful for your friendship and for the opportunities that we have together. We should learn together in good health, and B'ezrat Hashem this year Pesach, we should celebrate already in Yerushalayim. But until then, my last answer for why you have to review the halachot of Pesach. And the reason is, because every year there are new halachot. Every year new people make up new rules. And so every year I feel the need to remind people that we don't make up new rules when it comes to holidays. So I have an article right here. This article, I thought was an April Fool's joke. But it's not an April Fool's joke. This article seems to be very serious. The article is titled, Kashering Braces. So I'll translate for you. Some people have braces in their teeth. And the problem with the braces in their teeth is that they eat food that is chametz throughout the year. And now they are very perplexed. What do you do for Pesach? How do you make your braces kasher Pesach? And when people used to ask me this question in the past, I used to just tell them, you got to take a blowtorch and blowtorch your mouth. Like, yeah, it's a stupid question. You get a stupid answer. But today, this question is no longer stupid, and people are writing articles about it. And the conclusion here is, that really, in practice, fillings or braces needn't be kashered. Oh, I'm happy with this conclusion at the end of the article. Though one must stop eating hot chametz 24 hours before the time of eating chametz is over, some have a hidur, an extra stringency for Pesach, to kasher them somewhat. I never in my life in halachic literature met a term called kashering somewhat. But let's say, you have to kasher somewhat by drinking a hot drink above 113 degrees Fahrenheit, or at least slightly hotter than one usually drinks before the Zman. So now I'm living in a generation. 2 years ago I complained to you about orange juice, why does it need a hechsher? Now I'm dealing with a generation of people who think it's completely normal to tell you that you need to kasher your braces and your fillings in your mouth. That leads to the next article that I got, in which one rabbi suggested that there's a long-standing Hasidic practice. I don't know how long-standing it could be, you must understand, but it's long-standing. Not to get ceramic fillings in one's teeth, because ceramic cannot be kashered, but instead one should always opt in for metal fillings, because metal fillings can be kashered if you pour hot water on them. But that wasn't the worst of them all. I got another note, and this one says, some have the custom not to eat hot foods of 110 degrees or more on Pesach. So you have to understand, all of our Chachamim ate hot food on Pesach. But there's a new custom. Why should one not eat hot food on Pesach? Being that their teeth cannot be properly kashered. So because your teeth cannot be properly kashered, but Moshe Rabbeinu never heard about this. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai never heard about it. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi never heard about it. Rambam and Maran, even the Rama, never heard that one has to kasher their teeth. But now there's a minhag. What is the minhag? You shouldn't eat hot food at all on Pesach, because we don't know how to properly kasher our teeth. Now, if this was all an April Fool's joke, I would be quiet. But being that this is not a joke, and these people are absolutely serious by what they're saying, it doesn't stop there. A certain kashrut agency sent out a list this year that Kirkland water bottles contain chametz inside of the water. And one is not allowed to buy the water without their kosher for Passover supervision. You have to wait for that second half, right? Because it has to be under my supervision. And then just last night, someone reached out to ask me about sugar. What about sugar? Recently, a major kosher organization just put out, due to the increasingly common use of Passover questionable processing aids used in the manufacture of sugar, blank agency has decided to limit the brands recommended for Passover use to those with our kosher for Passover symbol. Rest assured, they say, if any of our certified granulated sugar was used in a Pesach product, post facto, those foods may still be considered kosher for Passover. So right in front of our nose, this happened yesterday. There is a major kosher organization that is now telling you you can no longer eat sugar on Pesach unless it has our kosher for Pesach label on it. And don't worry, if you already cooked with the sugar until now, it's fine. If you cooked with the sugar until now, it's fine. So what happened last night? Now the sugar magically became not fine? But this is the reality that most of Am Yisrael lives. And because this is the reality, but you should know, I have to tell you the truth. I used to think this was only the craziness that came to me as a Sephardic rabbi from the Orthodox world. And you know, we're familiar with the Orthodox world and all of its sicknesses and illnesses and all the problems that it has, namely in this area of halakha, complete ignorance in the realm of halakha. But I always hoped that at least other denominations of Judaism, none of which I subscribe to, would have an easier life or a better life or a more balanced understanding of Jewish text. But it's not true. This year I've been getting questions from left, right, center, anywhere you can possibly imagine in the Jewish spectrum, asking me the same things. Are my towels in my kitchen kasher lePesach? Now, someone doesn't ask that question because they're stupid. They ask that question because someone taught them that that's going to be an issue, which tells you that the person who taught them was stupid. You understand? Forgive me for using a harsh word, But the reality is that if a rabbi, Talmid Chacham Yani, tells you, your sugar has to be kasher lePesach, or your towels have to be kasher lePesach, come. Then really you should know that the same rabbi who told me I have to kasher my teeth, who's so illiterate of rabbinic literature, likely shouldn't be counted on or relied upon for any Jewish information at all. Not because they're bad, but because they're lacking any type of understanding in the way Jewish texts work. And so today's a shiur. There's a lot that I need to cover in the next hour and a bit that I have with you, B'ezrat Hashem. At the end of the shiur, I will stay here. It's only 12:15 in the afternoon for me right now. So I will stay here as long as you need me to answer any questions that you have in particular. I ask that unless you really have no ability to understand what's being said and going further, interrupt me. But if not, I'm not monitoring the chat box during the Zoom class. So if you write something, I'll read it maybe tomorrow. But if you want to ask something, or there's something you need to say, then please ask. But for the most part, I ask that you leave all of those questions until the end, so that I can help get through all the information that we need to get through today. B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. Where I want to start, Shalom Marlene. I wish to start with what may be our frame of reference. My frame of reference and my intended audience. So my intended audience is as follows. If you are listening to the shiur, and I am not your rabbi, so there's a red button at the bottom that says end, leave. You're welcome to click that button. I don't teach halachot to people who don't know me. So if you've never studied Torah with me before, or you don't care to study Torah with me, you're only here for some kind of Passover leniency you heard about from your friends, then this is really not the right channel for you. You're welcome to learn with somebody else who likes such a thing, but I'm not a hit-and-run rabbi. I don't just walk in, walk out. I have a relationship with every single person who's part of the Shiviti family. It might be very close, it might be a little distant, but this is your Bet Midrash, this is where you should be studying. If you plan to take this information and go to another rabbi and make his life miserable or her life miserable, if you're going to go and bother some other rabbinic leader in any other capacity, your parents, your in-laws, you want to fight with your mother-in-law, you want to stick it to her, I went to that class, and the class said, don't come to this class. I don't approve of fighting ever, especially not on Pesach, especially not around halakha. There's a reason I titled my book, Yehi Shalom. There should be peace. The whole purpose of halakha, Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. Torah scholars should increase peace in the world, not increase fighting in the world. Somebody once came to Posek. I heard it in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Abadi, but I don't know if that's accurate. And they asked him, Rabbi, I have a certain halachic question to ask you. Yes? He said, should I do this or should I do that? What is the proper approach in halakha? I said, what does your rabbi do? He said, I don't have a rabbi. I said, good. So go to the Bet Knesset. Do vidui, chata'ati aviti, pasha'ati, mashachatati lefanecha. Do vidui, confess. Do teshuvah, and go find yourself a rabbi. It says in the Mishnah, Aseh l'charav, make for yourself a rabbi. And then go ask him the question you want to ask me. I don't know you. Why ask me a question? Sometimes people ask questions in our forum, and they get upset. How come you didn't approve this product? Why is that? I don't have to go to Gehinnom for everything you want. There's literally thousands of things we've approved of for Pesach. So your special brand of tortilla chip with fake cheddar cheese on it, you're not going to have it for Pesach? What can I do? I don't have to always say yes or always jump in the bandwagon because someone needs their tortilla chips. So, number one, my intended audience, if you're part of this Bet Midrash, you belong here. And if you're not, and you intend to use this to make problems for other people, then please don't. Really, it's not right. Just like I don't want someone to come to my kehillah and say, oh, Rabbi so-and-so told me. So don't go to someone else's kehillah and do the same thing to them. And second, my frame of reference. My frame of reference is that Jewish law matters. Halakha is important. You can't just say, oh, it doesn't matter what the books say. Our custom is like that. To me, that's not Judaism. I know for many people that is. If you watch Fiddler on the Roof, for example, that's the main foundation, that one of the 14 principles of faith, according to Fiddler on the Roof, is tradition, tradition, tradition. If your tradition violates real tradition, then it's not a tradition. Because at some point in time, nobody did what you're doing. And if nobody did what you're doing, it's not a tradition. You understand? If once upon a time, everybody did something, and now you have some family practice not to do something, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter. Because tradition is what we've always done. Tradition is what was last codified by our national Supreme Court in the land of Israel. That was the Talmud. And then to continue that as understood by the Rambam and codified by Maran HaShulchan Aruch. So Rabbi Yosef Karo Shulchan Aruch, in my opinion, is not just binding on everyone, but is able to be observed by everyone. If you are Sephardic, if you are Ashkenazi, if you are Yemenite, if you are Hasidic, if you are wherever you come from, you don't have to apologize to anybody for observing halacha as written inside of the Shulchan Aruch. And as such, though I will randomly point out some Ashkenazim do this or some Sephardim do that, at the end of the day, if there's something that you wish to do that is in the Shulchan Aruch, that's what you should do. And not just for Pesach, but the whole year. All of this superstitious Judaism that follows all kinds of fabricated minhagim, kashering teeth of today is the prohibition of kitniyot of yesterday. So it sounds ludicrous to you that you should kasher your teeth? It sounded ludicrous to the Ashkenazi rabbis 1,000 years ago when they heard that people weren't eating beans on Pesach. And they wrote as much. But they were overruled. By whom? By the masses. The masses always overrule proper leadership. And so I ask that in this frame of reference, we begin learning everything that we need to learn today. There's a certain understanding in the Jewish world that more is better. When I do more of something, it's better. So for example, and this is not intended to offend anybody, but I've shared this a few times over the last weekend. I've been waiting to share this observation when it wasn't so politically charged. Hopefully you won't get as upset at me as you may have gotten 2 years ago. And all of you know that in my Kehillat, we followed every single one of the regulations that every city and state and county and country, everything. But when I come out of my shiur at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm alone in my parking lot, and I see somebody driving through the parking lot, 97 years old, probably the most dangerous thing they're doing is driving. All the windows rolled up, 2 masks on their face with a face protector. I say, you know, this person is afraid. They're afraid of something, but they have no idea what they're afraid of. Because if there were 4 other people in that car, fine, I get it. If they were driving with their windows down in traffic with 3,000 cars surrounding them, I get it. But you're alone in your car with the windows rolled up. Why are you wearing 2 masks and a face protector? And the answer is because I'm afraid of something, but I don't know how to deal. I don't know what I'm really afraid of, so I'm afraid of everything. The same thing happens on Pesach. People are afraid of chametz, but they have no idea what they're afraid of. So they do all kinds of outlandish things. You go to somebody's house, and you see they've covered the faucets with socks and duct tape. You think I'm crazy? They're crazy. Because they're afraid that maybe there's chametz in what? In the plastic knob of the faucet, okay, I'm listening, that they last 8 chametz on. They pour their chametz on the faucet, they lick it off. No? Or when new kasher lePesach stuff falls on the faucet, they then eat it from the faucet. Who eats off their faucet? But the reason why someone does such a thing is because they're afraid. They're afraid of chametz, but they don't know what to be afraid of. And they think that doing more is better. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you saw a person speeding on the highway. You're a police officer, you pull them over. You're doing 20 miles an hour over the speed limit. Yeah, but officer, I'm wearing 3 seatbelts. It doesn't help that you've installed 2 extra seatbelts in your car and now you're wearing 3 seatbelts. You're still breaking the rules. Your 3 seatbelts don't get you off the hook because you're doing 20 miles an hour. So the fact that you covered your counters with aluminum foil doesn't get you off the hook for not knowing Hilchot Pesach. But in the Jewish world that we live in, it's all about how many seatbelts can I put on. And the more the merrier. If you can get 20 seatbelts in your car, that would be amazing. I once went to somebody's home, and I saw that on Pesach, they had 7 tablecloths on their table. Now, how did I know? Because they don't match, so you could see them all. I said, why 7 tablecloths? Well, They said, basically, we kashered our table. You have to understand, you don't have to kasher a table. They poured boiling hot water on their wood table. And then they scrubbed it clean. And then they covered it with 7 tables. I said, why 7? They said, if we would have had 8, we would have put 8. Because it's 20 seatbelt mentality. And that's the Judaism that everyone is being taught. And today we're here to share that more is not better. You see, Rabbi Avraham, the son of the Rambam, in his introduction, it's not really his introduction, if we'll be honest, his book, Hamaspik L'Ovdei Hashem, The Guide to Serving God, we only have halfway through chapter 3. So the book begins halfway through chapter 3. The other chapters are missing for us. But there, at the beginning of the first chapter, which is really chapter 3, Rabbeinu Avraham says that a person who is some type of ascetic, who fasts their whole life, it's not going to help them when they eat one thing that's not kasher. Because nobody asks you to be an ascetic who fasts your whole life. But you had to keep the laws of kashrut. So what does it help the 30 years you lived in a cave and didn't eat? And then you ate something and it was wrong. There was a custom in the olden days, if you remember from Megillat Esther. Vayikra Mordechai et beganav, Mordechai rips his clothing, vayilbash, sak va'efer, and he puts on sackcloth and dirt on his forehead, ash. Why? It's a sign of asceticism, mourning. There were certain pietists in Jewish faith that used to wear uncomfortable clothing as a kaparat amonot, to atone for their sins. Says Rabbeinu Avraham, if you spent 10 years wearing uncomfortable clothing to get close to your God, but you one day wear a 4-cornered garment without tzitzit, then all of that goes out the window. Your 3 seatbelts go out of the window when you violate the actual law. And that brings me to the case of law. Here's how law works. Someone is driving on the highway. Some people say freeway, some people say highway. I'm not an expert what the difference between a freeway and a highway is. You're driving on the 5 north to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oregon, Seattle. You're doing the coast. And you're driving 95 miles an hour. And so after a certain amount of time, the light's behind you, someone pulls you over, you're doing 95 miles an hour. Did you break the law? Is that a crime? Yes, the answer is yes. You better not be doing 95 on the highway. My opinion, by the way, is that someone who speeds on the highway and they die in a car crash, you should not go to the levaya. It's their fault. Kaddish, I'm not certain you can say Kaddish for them. A person must be safe. That's a halakha. You have a biblical commandment to be safe. Aside from the legal requirement not to break the law, but you also have to observe the halachot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Take care of yourself. Your life is valuable. Now what happens? The same guy is driving on the highway. He learned a lesson. He doesn't want to do 95 this time. So what is he doing on the front? What speed limit here? 65. Some places 70. He decides he's going 35 miles an hour. Now he's doing 35 miles an hour. Is this person breaking the law? But they're being extra safe. They're not even getting near the speed limit. They're being super safe. See, the law says 65 miles an hour. So what speed limit do you drive? 65 miles an hour. If you're doing 35 miles an hour and a 65 mile an hour speed limit, you are breaking the law just as much as the person who's doing 95 miles an hour. The same thing is in halakha. If halakha says that there are 5 grains you cannot eat on Pesach, then there are 5 grains you cannot eat on Pesach, not 6 and not 4. If halakha says that the way to kasher your utensils is this way, and you decide, I want to be extra safe, I'll drive 35 miles an hour, you are still in contempt of Jewish law. Because halakha is not an option. Halakha is a requirement. 65 miles is not a suggestion. There are speed limits in certain places that are suggestions. They suggest you slow down on this curve. But the halachot that are written in the Shulchan Aruch are not suggestions. These halachot are intended for us to observe them. What about Sephardim and Ashkenazim? So Ashkenazim sometimes have slightly different versions of how these halachot work. Slightly is the key word here. I'm not talking about Ashkenazim of today. And so it's okay. You want to tell me that Ashkenazim want to follow the Rama? Fine. But if Sephardim and Ashkenazim follow the Shulchan Aruch and the Rama exclusively, there would be 3% of places where they disagreed in halakha. What we see today is the separation of the Jewish people into two completely different nations. That's what Haman says. Haman tells Achashverosh, Yeshno Am Echad, there's one nation. I mean, he doesn't say Yeshno Am, there is a nation. There is one nation. Mifozar umforad ben ha'amim. That they are scattered among the nations and they internally are dispersed. They're separated from each other. V'datehem shonot mikol am. V'datehem, their dat, their religion is different than any other nation. These are crazy people. Even among themselves, they're split. There's one Am Yisrael. All the denominations and the ethnicities, and we all belong to the same people. We all are trying to observe the same Pesach. And that could be the only thing in mind right now. Stop thinking in this dualistic, just what halakha wants from you. When we have that in mind, let's talk about a few of the differences. One of the major differences between Sephardim and Ashkenazim on Pesach is kitniyot. Everyone is familiar with this. According to the Torah says there are 5 grains you cannot eat. Just last night, somebody told me that the reason why Sephardim eat kitniyot is because they lived in countries where there was not enough food. And so they had to be lenient and eat things on Pesach that really were not allowed. Now, I'm sure that there's no upstanding Torah scholar who believes this, but the fact that a layperson came to tell this to me, thinking that it was so obvious, scares me. The Torah says there are 5 grains that are forbidden. The Torah actually doesn't say. The Torah says you cannot eat chametz or se'ol. Can you define for me, if you haven't been in one of my classes, what is chametz?
Leavened, something that's leavened grain.
So tell me the definition of leavened, at least according to today's halakha. It could be that there's an error somewhere in the way, but let's say, what's the definition of leaven today?
I don't really know the timing, but I think it's basically when it had a time to expand or swell up or something in the oven.
So when water touches flour of one of the grains, correct? And more than 18 minutes pass, we consider that to be chametz. Yes? Because matzah is also flour and water. So wheat is chametz. No, wheat is not chametz. Wheat that has been cooked more than that amount of time is chametz. Next, I then have se'ol. HaKadosh says you cannot have se'ol in your house. What is se'ol? Machla.
I believe that it's the starter dough, the fermented water and flour that you would put into new batches.
So se'ol is not yeast like people translate it. Se'ol is what used to be yeast. So se'ol is the dough that you let it spoil. It really, that's what happens. It ferments, it sours. And if you ever smelled the challah dough before, challah dough smells bad. Some people like the smell, but it smells sour. Chametz comes from the Hebrew word chamutz, chometz, sour. If you smell matzah dough, for example, it smells sweet. It doesn't smell sour. It didn't have time to have that fermentation process happen to it. The sourdough is the worst. It's actually sour. But they use sourdough, and people who are like snobby bakers, they're really into their starter doughs, and they have 100-year-old starter doughs and all kinds of. This starter dough is really a spoiled dough. They keep it in a dark place in their kitchen. It's like they want it to get all the bacteria it could possibly get. And this dough, you put it in a new dough, and it's what makes the dough rise. This se'ol, even though you would think that because it's so spoiled, it doesn't count as chametz, but really it's not allowed to be in our house. So chametz and se'ol are the 2 things that we're not allowed to have in Pesach. What about everything else? Sugar, paper towels, I don't know, whatever. If they don't have chametz or se'ol, then everything else is permissible. Along came some Ashkenazi Jews, not Talmidei Chamim, and they began this practice of not eating kitniyot. Kitniyot is a fascinating word because it doesn't mean anything. What kitniyot means doesn't match up to what Ashkenazim do or don't eat. So beans, rice, now they have corn, sesame. Someone told me recently something else I couldn't believe they told me was kitniyot. But all these mustard seed, all kinds of things that are now considered to be soybeans, all of these things are prohibited. For which reason? I'll tell you the reason. There's one Jewish community that also does not eat kitniyot. It's a parallel Jewish community to ours, and it's called the Karaite Jewish community. The Karaite Chachamim, because they don't have an oral law like we have, or at least not our oral law, they maybe do have an oral law, but not ours. Chametz can mean anything sour. Karaites avoid vinegar, avoid wine. Karaites avoid anything fermented. Certain Karaite communities have different customs regarding corn and rice and beans. Not all Karaim are the same. The Rabbi Yosef Kafich writes that it is so obvious that this custom came to the Jewish community from the Karaites. And it's not the first Ashkenazi practice that we have that comes from the Karaite community. There are others that Maran and the Rambam scream out about. How could you do things like that? You have an obligation to follow rabbinic law, not Karaite law, with all due respect to the Karaites. But over time, even though this minhag was battled against by Ashkenazi rabbis, it took momentum, gained momentum. Maran in his Bet Yosef says, I don't know anyone who's particular about this, Zulati Ashkenazim, aside from the Ashkenazim. I never heard of a person who's particular. Today there are many Sephardic communities who don't eat very different types of kitniyot. The Sephardim took it even worse. In certain Sephardic countries, they don't even eat things that sound like the word chametz. So for example, hummus, they won't eat it because it sounds like chametz. Rabbi Yosef Masah says, in your wild imagination that hummus sounds like chametz, what about chometz, vinegar? I add, Yonatan Halevy says, what about chamtzan, oxygen? Maybe you shouldn't have oxygen on Pesach. What about, says Rabbi Yosef Masah, every single day of Pesach you read the Torah reading and you say, chametz, 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 chametz. You could say chametz, so what are you so afraid of saying chametz for? But that already has become a thing. And today you live in a world where you don't know anymore what people eat. In my wife's own family, there's a minhag not to eat potato starch. So all of those Pesach foods that you know in the grocery stores, those cakes and those cookies and the cereals, they're really just potatoes with sugar and food coloring in various shapes and forms. And palm oil, which is bound to kill you if you eat enough of it. So palm and cottonseed oil, that's the favorite oil of the kosher companies, cottonseed oil. Do you know the reason why people eat cottonseed oil? It's on topic. Cottonseed oil, the reason why companies use it is because it's cheaper. Why do the kosher agencies recommend using cottonseed oil? The reason is very simple. Most of the oils have been determined to be kitniyot. Yes? So today even canola oil is considered kitniyot, though the chief rabbin of Israel doesn't consider it to be kitniyot. You have peanut oil, which all the Ashkenazim used to use in the turn of the century. And then Moshe Feinstein said, obviously we didn't have this in Russia, so it's not considered, peanuts are not considered kitniyot. Today Ashkenazim almost as a whole do not eat peanuts or peanut oil. And so what's left? You need an oil that is not a kitniyot. And so here's the twisted thinking. The Rambam says there are three types of grains or seeds. There are those that human beings eat, those that animals eat, and those that even animals won't eat because they're not fit for animal consumption. Cotton seeds are on the third list of things that even animals won't eat. And as such, our modern kosher organizations believe that it cannot be kitniyot because even animals wouldn't eat them. So what do? We take them and put them in our Pesach food and give them to our children because we'd rather feed them to our children than to our animals. And there really is a sakanat nefashot here. We're eating things that are dangerous for people, all under the guise of keeping Hilchot Pesach. Now there's no mitzvah to eat beans or rice or corn. So if you don't want to eat kitniyot on Pesach, nobody's going to force you. But to treat these things as if they're prohibited somehow, if you go to someone's home and you have meat that's been cooked in a pot of rice and you're afraid to eat the meat, it's because you don't even understand the Ashkenazi stance of kitniyot. Kitniyot are not chametz. And you cannot possibly treat them worse than you would treat chametz. And I ask, I'm not forcing anyone to eat anything. But to just remember, even if you want to refrain from something, and even if you don't mind ignoring the shady origins of a custom, at the very least, stop treating it mentally, in your mind, as if it's something wrong. But maybe the most major difference between Sephardim and Ashkenazim on Pesach is not kitniyot at all. I've always been bewildered by why everyone thinks kitniyot is the major difference. I have in my book 13 differences between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. And kitniyot, by the way, Marlene is sitting here. Marlene edited my book, so every time she gets a shout out. Thank you so much for editing my book, Baruch Hashem, and for everything else she does for us. They don't see you. You don't have to be embarrassed. One of the major differences, Maran says, if you go buy cheese or meat or fish that were processed, so we're not talking about like raw fish or raw meat. They're pickled, they're smoked, they're preserved. Says Maran that even though there was no care taken to make these kasher Pesach, so nobody was careful about the countertops or the gloves but you know there's no chametz ingredients here. Maran says this food is kasher Pesach. No special care has to be taken to make something kasher Pesach. That's Maran's ruling. Along comes the Rama, says no, in Ashkenaz we have a custom, is that we're choshesh, we have a doubt that there's something called choser v'neor. Choser v'neor means that even though chametz is nullified before Pesach, so you know this halakha for sure, that even though on Pesach, if a crumb of chametz falls into your food, and there's 1,000 times kasher food to the crumb of chametz, is it nullified in 60? No, chametz on Pesach is not nullified even in 1,000. Who made that rule? Is that a biblical rule or a rabbinic rule? Chametz on Pesach is a biblical rule, not eating it. But nullified chametz on Pesach, that is a rabbinic rule. That's a rabbinic rule. And as such, you have to remember that rabbinic rules cannot be stretched for eternity. There are Jews in Israel, for example, who don't drink tap water on Pesach, or don't cook with tap water on Pesach, because in the Kinneret up north, where Israel gets its water source from, there are tourists who throw bread to the birds. And that crumb of bread that fell into the Kinneret is now attached to the water in my faucet, and chametz, even at 1,000, is not nullified. But in 500 million, is it nullified? There's a limit to how far you can stretch any rabbinic rule. It's not chametz. It's a rabbinic prohibition of chametz, which means we don't do it. But chametz that falls into your food before Pesach, is it nullified in 60? Absolutely. By the way, more than that, chametz before Pesach is not nullified just when it falls into your food. You can intentionally nullify chametz before Pesach, knowing you're going to eat it on Pesach. Can I give you an example? Let's say you come to a place, and you know that you're not going to be able to make the pots and pans kasher. You don't have enough time to make it kasher before Pesach. So what should you do? You should cook kasher the Pesach food inside of chametz pots and pans that were used in the last 24 hours and have been cleaned. And even though there are absorptions of chametz that come back into your food, your chicken soup with matzah balls, that food is completely kasher le Pesach, and you can serve it at your seder. Because before Pesach, chametz is not prohibited. Before Pesach, you ate chametz for breakfast, no? So before Pesach, you can eat as much chametz as you want. Maybe you shouldn't eat so much, but you can have as much as you want. Which tells you that before Pesach, nothing really needs to be nullified in the first place. It's on Pesach where chametz becomes a prohibition. But what does the Rama say? Ashkenazim are concerned about this concept of choser v'neor. That on Pesach, the chametz reawakens, and it jumps out of your pot of chicken soup, and then it jumps back into your pot of chicken soup. And now it falls into your chicken soup a second time on Pesach. And because of that, Ashkenazim are particular to avoid things that have chametz inside of them before Pesach. Meaning, some kind of absorption of nullified chametz. Well, that's true. The Rama says, so what about the preserved fish or the cheese or whatever else? The Rama says, if you wash it off 3 times, it's fine. I mean, the Rama is telling you, his halachic opinion is like Maran. But there's a custom. And out of that custom, Ashkenazim are more particular about processed products before Pesach. See, but there has to be a limit to that minhag also. Because when I go to the grocery store, and I see 2 gallons of olive oil for $23 with a regular kosher symbol on it. And I see right next to it the kosher for Passover one, which is a quarter of the quantity, for $46.99. So how much do you pay for a minhag? What I'm asking is, how much can you lose financially because of a minhag? When people who have jobs, they work for a living, come to me before Pesach to collect for money because they don't have enough money to buy food for their family for Pesach. And when I ask them, what kind of food are you buying for Pesach? How is it different than any of your regular Shabbatot? You work. It's not a person who's usually on the receiving end of tzedakah. And then you realize that they buy everything with some super special kosher for Passover label that costs them 4, 5, 6 times the price. When I order chicken or meat the same exact chicken and meat that I ordered a month ago, and it's $4 more a pound because of Pesach. So already a long time ago, I told my Talmidim in San Diego, buy all of your kosher for Pesach food before Purim. Just go buy chicken and meat before Purim. Before they price gouge, before they raise all their prices, and go, because there's no difference between the chicken that you buy. But they didn't have the special white paper on the tables to make sure there was no chametz. According to the Shulchan Aruch, you don't have to worry. All of the meat and fish in your freezer, and all of that is fine for Pesach. All of your spices and your tea bags and your coffee, all of them are fine for Pesach. What about my spices that I bake with and flour goes inside of them? Remember, the rule is no chametz. So if there's flour inside of your spices, then those are the spices you shouldn't be using for Pesach. But your salt and your pepper and your oregano flakes, or whatever you have in your... Why in the world are you concerned with them having chametz? Because they weren't made special for Pesach. If I had to tell you that half the things you think are made especially for Pesach are just the same thing with a new label on it. And so I will tell you that this difference that exists between Maran and Rama, in my opinion, has caused too much damage to Am Yisrael. And if the Rama was sitting here today, I'm certain he would agree that the ruling is like Maran. You don't have to, for the price that people are paying, for people are losing because of this, everybody can, especially if you buy something before Pesach. So there's no issue in the first place. I'm telling you, even on Pesach. One of the kosher agencies just put out that the avocado oil at Costco was not kosher at Pesach. Why? Can I ask you an interesting question? Miriam, you said that flour and water, when they come in contact, they become chametz, correct? What about flour and avocado oil? If flour and avocado oil come in contact, how long does it take for it to become chametz? It never becomes chametz. It never becomes chametz.
If it's a pure oil, it shouldn't, because it doesn't have water content.
Very good. Pure oil, we're assuming something is real oil, never becomes chametz. It doesn't cause grains to become chametz. So even if there was, I don't know, there's flour floating in your avocado oil, there isn't, but let's pretend. So what's the problem? Maybe now you're going to add it to water? I can't help everybody with their problems. Let me talk to you about Tevilat Keilim for a minute. So now we're moving to our kitchen, and in our kitchen, before I say one more thing about money and finances and everything else. For Pesach, many are under the impression they need to have shemura matzah. Maran writes in Shulchan Aruch that there is a custom. Particularly, righteous people are careful that when they eat matzot on Pesach, at least the ones for the Seder, they eat matzah that was made with grains that have been watched that they shouldn't come in contact with water from the time they have been harvested. Because when they're in the field, they come in contact with water all the time. Yes, people don't realize that. All of the people, we eat the grains that it didn't rain on when they were growing. Well, how do you think they grew? It's when they harvest them, they don't come in contact with water. It says Maran, if you can't find flour like that, so get grains that you watch them from when they were turned from grain into flour. So you go to the store and you can grind your own flour. That's it. And if not, you can use any flour in the store. Now today there are certain flours that have been processed with water. I don't recommend going to the grocery store unless you know which flour to look for. One of my dear friends, Benjamin Simcha, he has checked into a certain number of companies to find out which flours could be used that don't have any contact with water. But you go to the store and you see a box of matzah shemura, and that box can cost you $30, $40, $50. I didn't know that in New York it could go to $60, $70, and $80. And so let's say you really want to have matzot shemurot for the Seder. Let's say you really want to do it. Fine. But the rest of Pesach, those matzot that come from the machines, I know there was a machine matzah controversy. My father, should live and be well, he gave a class one year, Shavuot, all about the controversy surrounding the machine matzot when those machines were first invented. Those matzot never make mistakes. Those machines don't mess up. They're always cleaning themselves, they're always baking matzot, everything is fully baked. Chacham Ovadia Yosef, when he was a young man, couldn't afford to buy matzot shemurot. And for the first maybe 20 years of his marriage, he used machine matzot for everything, including the Seder. It's not the end of the world. The machine matzot cost $5 for a pack of 5, sometimes $10. Please, I'm asking you, the chumot that you have. I had a guy come here to my kehillah once, here in San Diego. It was driven around by the local, there's a guy who drives people around. The guy's not allowed in my Beit Knesset, so he's not allowed to come here. But he takes 50% of anything the person collects. So they come to the synagogue and they collect $100, the driver takes a 50% cut. And so this guy came to me, Chabadnik, he was a Chassid. He needed matzot for Pesach. I tried to explain to him that if he can't afford matzot, he just buy a machine. I'll give him all the machine matzot he needs. No, I need matzot. So I got him a box of machine matzot, shemot, like $30 for the box. I gave him the box. The next week he came to me asking me for another box of matzot. I says, my dear friend, I told you already you don't need it, but I gave it to you. I bought you these matzot. Why do you need another box? He said, in every box there are 3 matzot shemurot. There are 3 shmura matzahs. And I got into the car, and the driver took 1.5 matzot from me. So now he needs another 1.5 matzot to be able to do his seder, so he has 3. So that driver is not allowed in my community. Threw him out a long time ago. It's a resha. To steal from poor people is an evil thing in the world. But this person also has to know, if I'm collecting money for a living, I don't have money at home, then all of these chumot, they don't matter. There's all these Hasidic stories you hear, but the guy whose family was starving and they didn't have any food, and then he was taking from his paycheck and he was hiding it in his drawer to go buy $1,000 etrog, and he bought the etrog and he came home and his wife saw the etrog and she got so mad and she broke it on the floor, and in heaven they said, wow, nobody has ever sacrificed so much for Judaism since Yitzchak, our forefather, until this man with the etrog. And I look at that story and I say, what kind of evil person deprives his wife and his children of food for the sake of an etrog? But there's a fundamental difference in the outlook. And that's why I'm grateful that you're all here. Let's talk about Tevilat Keilim. You have utensils in your kitchen. Inevitably, anybody here is going to go buy something for Pesach. It's a new pot, it's a new pan, it's a new spatula, it's a new cup, it's a new plate, whatever it is. I want to tell you very briefly those halachot. I have an entire video on Tevilat Keilim. If you need more details on YouTube, you're welcome to check that out. It was taught at the Chabura in London. The bottom line is, anything made out of metal, biblically, or glass, rabbinically, anything made out of metal or glass that you use to eat or cook food with, that directly comes in contact with food, that you own, not something you rent, something that you own, that you bought from a non-Jewish source, meaning that a Jewish person didn't make it. So anything made by someone who wasn't Jewish, like a factory in China, that you use for the preparation or the consumption of food, that is made out of metal or glass and you own it, you're not renting it, requires to be immersion in the mikveh, Tevilat Keilim, with a blessing before you use it. Now some say by glass, maybe not a blessing. It's interesting that Rambam doesn't have a blessing at all in Tevilat Keilim, which is something I should talk about at a different time. You take this utensil to a mikveh, it has to be a kasher mikveh, or the ocean, or a lake, or another natural body of water that is kasher for a mikveh, and you immerse it inside, and then that mikveh, the utensil, is able to be used. How many times can you use it before you have to immerse it? 0. There's some kind of fairy tale that goes around. You can use it once, but not after that. Listen, if you have to use a utensil before you immerse it, so you're violating a rabbinic law, not a biblical law. Because the biblical law is to immerse it. The rabbinic law is to use it before it was immersed. So during COVID, for example, when the mikvot were closed, whatever else it was, in some places like in New York, they weren't allowed even to walk to the beach. It was a lockdown. So I told people that if you're going to keep track of which you bought a utensil for Pesach, now you can't go anywhere to immerse it. So use it, you'll violate a rabbinic law, but use it for Pesach, and then afterwards, when they open it up, you go take it to the mikveh. But that's a one-time sticky situation. For the most part, that's not what we would do. Metal, glass, what needs tevilah? Pots, pans, metal, spatulas, cooking utensils, forks, knives, spoons, plates and bowls that are made out of glass, cups that are made out of glass. All of those things require tevilah. What does not require tevilah? The grates in your barbecue require tevilah. You bought a new grill for Pesach, they require tevilah. The grates in your oven, for example, don't, because you don't really cook on them. You cook in things on them. That might not be true for your microwave oven, not the microwave oven, the toaster oven. Those little trays, maybe you do put food on them, they might need tevilah. The glass thing in your microwave, the rolling thing, you don't actually put food on it. You normally put food on something on it, and therefore that does not require tevilah. Your blender requires tevilah. So a glass blender with a metal blade, or even a plastic blender with a metal blade. The metal blade or the glass require tevilah. You'd have to immerse them in a mikveh. A new hot water urn, for example, would require tevilah. What about electrical appliances that you're afraid of ruining them? So I'll tell you a few answers. The first, if you really want to be brave, because any low-tech appliance, not a high-tech, so if it's like some kind of fancy digital display, don't listen to what I'm telling you. A low-tech appliance, it just has an on and off switch. If you put it in the water and you let it dry in the sun for 3 or 4 days, it will be fine. Nothing will happen to it. You can use it on Pesach without dying. B'ezrat Hashem. Just make sure it's completely dry. If it's something else that for whatever reason you cannot immerse it, if you are able to take it apart to the point where it cannot be used and put it back together, some poskim say that that's considered that you built it. But most appliances today are constructed in such poor fashion that if you would take it apart, you probably couldn't do it. And last but not least, there are those who say you can give it to somebody who's not Jewish and then borrow it from them for Pesach. But there's a danger of what we call olma, trickery in halakha. In which case, that might work for a day or two, but for a year or two, you can't do something like that for a long-term fix. Maybe if you want to have an opinion that I don't believe in halakha, but there is an opinion that anything attached to the ground does not require tevilat. So it's already part of something. It's not a utensil. It's part of the earth. And so some say that because you have to plug the appliance into the wall and it wouldn't work if it was not plugged into the wall, then it doesn't require tevilat at all. I don't like it, so I'm not suggesting it. I'm just sharing with you in case you've heard it somewhere else. Before I move on, any questions about Tevilat Keilim? Anything you want to know if it requires tevilat or not? Okay? One thing I will tell you about tevilah, it has nothing to do with kashrut. So if you cook something in a utensil that was not immersed, you can still eat it. It doesn't make it prohibited to eat. And if something became chametz or something became meat and milk mixed together, taking it to the mikveh doesn't help. It just makes the mikveh chametz. It doesn't actually make the mikveh chametz. There's nothing it helps with. The water in the mikveh doesn't help with kashrut. The water in the mikveh helps with the laws of Tevilat Keilim. The next part of our kitchen, and this is likely the most stressful part of cleaning for Pesach, is making the kitchen kasher Pesach. So we know that you have to remove chametz, and we know that you have to remove se'or. And before I go any further, there is a custom that many people have to sell their chametz. So they take their chametz and they sell it. If I could give you just a brief word on selling chametz before I get to kashering utensils. The selling of the chametz is a matter of much dispute among our rabbis. There are those who view it as a fake, fictitious sale that doesn't work. There are those of our rabbis who believe it is a bona fide sale of chametz and everyone can do it. Really, the sale of chametz was intended to help people avoid suffering tremendous financial loss for Pesach. You own a factory of what? Of bread. And you're going to close your factory for the 8 days of Pesach. You are. But you still have a warehouse with $1 million worth of bread. And then what are you going to do with this bread? It's all frozen. What are you going to do with it? You're going to throw it away for Pesach? So, our rabbi tells you, you don't have to lose $1 million worth of bread for Pesach. We'll make a sale. You sell it to someone non-Jewish. You close the warehouse. You give the non-Jew the keys. It's his. After Pesach, you buy it back from him. That's a real sale, and there's a real need for that sale. What happens today is I have an unopened box of cookies I bought for $2, and a bag of pasta that I bought for $1, and I don't know, a can of chicken soup with noodles. I don't know. Don't eat it. It's going to kill you. But you have that can. It lasts until 2035. That's when it lasts until. The chicken is in there too. It lasts until 2035. And you say, I need to sell these things. Why? Because I can't suffer a $5 loss. So what ends up happening, you take it, you put it in some cabinet, I don't know, in your garage, and you put a little piece of tape, just chametz on it. And then you sell it, you go to the rabbi or you go to Chabad.org and you put it in, you sell your chametz. And let me give you the scenario. It's 3 o'clock in the morning on the second night of your seder. And Christopher, who's an upstanding citizen of the neighborhood who the rabbi sold your chametz to, decides he really wants some of your chicken soup. Why wait until 2034? So he comes to your door and knocks on the door and says, hey, I have some stuff in the garage. I want to go take get out of my house. I don't want you in my house. No, listen, my stuff is in your house. I would like to access my chicken soup. What's the next thing you do? You break the holiday by calling the police that there's an invader in your house. So did you really sell the chametz or you didn't sell the chametz? Do you really believe that chametz belongs to somebody else? There was a rabbi in Neve Yaakov. He said to his community, this year you're not keeping the chametz in your house. I'm renting one of these big tractor trailers. I'm going to have it delivered before Pesach, right on the block of the synagogue. Everybody's going to put their chametz in a labeled box inside of the trailer. I'm going to lock it. I'm going to sell it to Mr. Mohammed, the custodian. Great. Everyone's so excited. We're finally going to do it right. We're going to take the chametz out of our house. What happened? It was the third day of Chol HaMoed. Mohammed shows up with his friend who has a cab to connect the trailer to. And he hitches it up to his truck and he starts driving away. And these guys start screaming and throwing rocks at his way. You're stealing our chametz, you're stealing our chametz. It's the third day of Chol HaMoed Pesach. If he's stealing your chametz, then you own chametz on Pesach. That's a biblical prohibition. And so my recommendation, if you don't need to sell chametz, don't sell chametz. The best is maybe sell things you're not sure if they're chametz or not. You don't know, you couldn't verify the ingredients, the maltodextrin, you don't know if it comes from wheat or corn. Fine, you could sell that. But to sell your chametz, unless you have a great need. For example, if someone is keeping yashan, I'll look the other way if you sell your chametz because you have a need to store chametz. I get it, I understand. The mitzvah of keeping yashan might be greater. I'll give in for that. But other things, animal crackers. Now, people say, but it's a waste of food. I'm going to have to throw it all away. Who allows you to throw away food for Pesach? There's a biblical prohibition of wasting food. Every year people come on Pesach, they bring me a box of food they want me to burn. I don't burn food. Burning food is a biblical prohibition. But I can't own it. There's a food bank in the neighborhood. There's a church that gives out food every Sunday to people. Go take your chametz, it's clean, it's packaged, it's not expired yet, and donate it to people who actually need it. I've been sending chametz over the border for the last month with my cleaning lady. Bags and bags of chametz for all the people who, I'm not going to be able to finish before Pesach. I don't want to sell chametz on Pesach. So let people have it that are going to use it. Why burn it? Why throw it away? That's also a biblical prohibition. There are a lot of people who don't have food. There are a lot of kids who don't have animal crackers in their lunch boxes this week because their parents can't bring home enough money for that. This is something that a person has to think about. Nobody said you have to waste food, but you're not allowed to own chametz. So the sale of chametz should be used really only when a person needs it. And where do you sell your chametz? People always want to sell chametz with me. I'm grateful that you want to sell your chametz with me, but if you live in New York, I can't sell your chametz. You have to sell the chametz wherever your body, your physical body is going to be on Pesach. So if your chametz is in San Diego, but you're going to Florida for Pesach, so then you have to sell chametz in Florida because the chametz cannot be owned by you in the time zone in which you're going to be. If you're in Israel, same story. Any questions about the sale of chametz?
If I was to sell chametz with an intention of if someone showed up and wanted it, I would be like, no problem, just take it. Just because, let's say, I would have like a lot of, I don't know, expensive whiskey, let's say, at home. But let's say I would be prepared for someone to come. But then again, I sell it online, so on a form, so it's not really like, I don't know. So it's sort of like, I'll be happy to give it away if obviously someone came and took it, but on the other hand, I know it's not really going to happen because I'm doing it online, so.
Yeah, if it's not going to happen, it doesn't matter. The question is if you really believe you're selling it. And it's important when you sell something, it should be closed away. You don't have access to it. It's really inside of another container somewhere. It shouldn't just be sitting on the shelf in your refrigerator or in your liquor cabinet that you're just not looking at it. It has to be put away. And if somebody were to come, here's your box of chametz. I'm not going to tell you the sale is a fake sale. I'm not of that opinion. It's a real sale if you do it properly, with the right intention and with the right people. Okay. But I was once...
I have a question.
Yes.
So, I kind of cut off because my reception was bad, but I didn't hear the last part. But what if, like you said, we put it away in a box and something, nobody comes and picks it up? Do we don't dispose of it or we give it away?
No, you have to sell it. So you have to sell it through a rabbi. Your local synagogue should be able to handle it. If not, it's one of those 2 times a year. I recommend you visit Chabad.org and check out their sale of chametz and give them a little donation for doing you a favor. They'll sell chametz anywhere in the world for you at any place and time. So you have to sell it, but you also have to put it away. So you can't see it or have access to it on Pesach itself.
So it's like you put it in a box or...
Yeah, or in a cabinet that you lock or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that... I've seen people put the metal, foil, and put it in a box and foil it up and hide it away in a cabinet.
You know, Jews on Pesach have some kind of obsession with aluminum foil. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it comes from. We didn't have aluminum foil 100 years ago, so I'm not sure. Like, I really don't know. I would love for someone to research the evolution of Jewish obsession with aluminum foil. I don't know where it comes from. But you don't have to do that. So just don't worry about the aluminum foil part. Do everything else aside from the aluminum foil part. And by the way, when it comes to selling the chametz, you just remind me of something. But I don't know. I don't remember right now. Mechila. When I remember, I will tell you. Kashering your dishes. So let's walk you through your kitchen right now. I want to explain to you this halakha as simply as possible. In the past, I've spent a lot of time on it, but let me explain it to you as simple as possible. And I'm going to thank in advance Liba, my moderator, who has donated for the sake of science a play set. You should know, my twin daughters are very upset that they don't have access to this toy set that I use every year, and they always want to play with it. I don't let them. I bought them their own. Actually 2 or 3 sets of their own, but they still like mine. And so what I do for them today, Shira and Hodaya cleaned every one of these plates for me before I brought it today. And they were covered a little bit of dust. I wanted to have an opportunity to play with it, so they got to play with it at least in that fashion. So here's how the halakha works. And I can tell which of my daughters is a better balabusta than the other one, just for the record. So we have a basic halakha in the laws of kashrut, that absorbent materials that are used for cooking in heat, they absorb flavor. So let's give you a classic example. If I use this pot that is made of an absorbent metal, which it's not, but let's say that it was, and this pot was made with chicken soup, for example. Now I wash out this pot and I clean it. This pot's status is bisari. It's a meat pot until when? Until 24 hours later. So if I do it now, it's 1:10 in San Diego. Tomorrow at 1:11, it's now parve, according to the Torah. It kashers itself after 24 hours. The reason? Any absorption is prohibited only when it's still good and gives off a good flavor. But after 24 hours, it gives off a bad flavor because it spoils. And therefore, that bad flavor is no longer a problem of kashrut. So spoiled chicken that goes into your macaroni and cheese is not a kashrut problem. It's a gross problem, but not a kashrut problem. So really after 24 hours, on a biblical level, everything in your kitchen is already parve and kasher lePesach. I need you to remember that. After 24 hours since it was last used, everything in your kitchen is parve and kasher lePesach. I use the word parve because there is no Sephardic word for parve. We don't have a word for that. So I borrow a Yiddish word. Our rabbis instituted a decree, atu eno ben yomo, atu ben yomo. They were afraid that maybe you're not going to wait until 1:11, you're going to use it at 12:15. Now at that time, that's a problem, because if you make mac and cheese in a pot that only waited 23 hours, that mac and cheese is now a biblically prohibited mixture of meat and milk. And so our rabbi said that until you actually kasher your utensil, I'm borrowing another English Yiddish word. Kasher is not a word. The verb is lehachshir or hachshara, but not kasher. But I'm going to say it because that's what everybody knows. Some people say kosherize. I don't know, it's too much for me. This pot needs to undergo a kashering process before I can use it for meat or for milk or for Pesach or for whatever the opposite designation that it originally had. So the rule in the Torah is kol asher yavo ba'esh. Everything that will come from fire should go through fire. V'chol asher yavo b'mayim b'meni da'it chatan. Everything that came through water should be kasher through water, meaning the way that it absorbed flavor is the way that it expletes flavor. So now we remember that after 24 hours, the obligation to kasher utensils is only a rabbinic obligation. And that's why we always recommend you wait 24 hours anyways to kasher your utensils, because then you're not dealing with actual kashering. You're dealing really with just a rabbinic notion of kashering. So how do I make my utensils kasher lePesach? There are a number of methods, and I'm going to share all of them with you. The first is libun. Libun is, let's say you have a barbecue. And that barbecue uses dry heat. It's coals, it's gas, it's wood, it's whatever you use. Electricity, hopefully. I don't know, people grill with electricity? Maybe. Coals, gas, wood. And there's fire, and there's dry heat. You put a steak, you put chicken, you put salmon, you put whatever you put. Those grates of the barbecue, before you kasher anything, I said you wait 24 hours, and number two, you clean everything well, like you're going to have no residue on it, like you're going to sell it to somebody else. Barbecues are actually infamously difficult to clean, but let's say you could clean your barbecue. Now the way you kasher that is by lighting a fire and letting it burn in that fire. Now what about there's a word for this in English, you're going to help me out. On the barbecue. It's not a spatula, but there's a word for it. One of you must speak English. What do you call the burger flipper thing? A spatula? What?
Spatula.
Let's call it a spatula. Okay, that must be the English word for it. So this spatula that you use in the fire, how do you make it kasher lePesach? You put it in the fire. Now, I am very careful in my barbecue the whole year. I don't use things that are chametz, not the sauces, nothing. So for me, I don't worry. I don't put breadcrumbs in my burgers, none of that. But let's say people do, and the sauces or whatever you use are chametz, so that's the way you kasher things on fire. What about things that are used in the oven? So you have a pan. Let's call this a pan. You put your rice, your green beans, your lasagna, but something that is chametz, lasagna, yes? Now you put it in the oven. It bakes on 350 degrees. How do you kasher this? So it has to be clean. You wait 24 hours, and then you put it in the oven on the same temperature, a little bit higher. You want to be strict, put on 500 degrees. I did this to my wife. We first got married. I told her, forget the blow torches and the boiling water. Let's just put everything in the oven, and I'll bake it for you. It'll all be kosher, because that's how it works according to halakha. I didn't realize that all the handles of her pots that her mother bought her were soldered on. And so all of my wife's pots and pans are missing the handles. So every Friday, my wife burns her fingers in the chicken soup and says, yeah, it's because of your stupid idea 8 years ago that you put my pot in the oven. So she has new pots. Don't think. My wife is not an oppressed lady, but she likes that chicken soup pot. So we still sometimes burn our fingers, and every time it's my fault, even 8 years later. Now, when you use something on the stovetop, this is where things get a little more, not complicated, but just more detailed. So this is my pot. Let's use a better pot. Imagine this is a pot and not a frying pan. So this is my pot that I make chametz pasta in it. Okay? Now I want to make this kosher, so I wait 24 hours. It's cleaned, obviously. Now what I do is I boil hot water in this pot, because this became chametz by being boiled on the stove. So now I boil hot water here, and I immerse this inside of that, and it has to fill it up completely, so it has to be immersed completely. And now this small pot is kasher lePesach. What about a pan, a frying pan? A frying pan is a machloket between Sephardim and Ashkenazim, a very simple one, about whether, let's say you scramble eggs. Do you scramble eggs with liquids or without liquids? Is it dry heat or wet heat? Is it a wet method of cooking or a dry method of cooking? If you put oil, then it's wet. But what about, there's sometimes the oil doesn't cover the whole bottom of the pan, and sometimes the egg is touching a little bit of the pan and it has no oil? So Sephardim say it doesn't matter. The reason it doesn't matter? Our rule is you always kasher something according to the majority of its use. So let's give you an example. I'll give you an example in a minute. Here's a good example. This spatula, I usually use it to flip my eggs. But once I used it to flip a burger outside. So which method of kashering does it need? The fire or the water? According to Maran, only the water. Because that was a one-time thing. That's not the way that it was used. Remember, it's only a rabbinic obligation after 24 hours. And so the rabbis say kasher it, but only kasher it the way it's usually used. And so we don't worry that there's a little bit of the pan that doesn't have oil, because that's the way we usually use it. Ashkenazim have a stringency when possible. It's not an obligation. When possible, to put this in dry heat. Because there are some places in the pan that the liquid didn't touch. Hara Perez doesn't agree and says Ashkenazim can just use liquids, but I'm telling you both opinions for the sake of transparency. Now, this would be put even as a frying pan inside of a pot of water, correct? Now, if I wanted to kasher the thing that you take spaghetti out, I'm sure there's an English word for this too, some kind of strainer spoon that you take the pasta out. Now this, is it used on the fire? No, this is used not even in the it's used in boiling hot water on a stovetop. So the way you kasher it is by immersing it again inside of the water. But what about I have it here somewhere. Yes. I know the English word for this. The colander. What about my colander? I now pour my pasta into my colander, right? Has this ever sat on a stovetop? No. So how does it become kasher? By taking boiling hot water from the stove and pouring it all over the colander. Correct? So it no longer needs boiling hagala. It needs irui, the pouring of hot water from an initial heat source. Now, let's say, I found my pan, guys. Let's say that I make my chicken soup with noodles, and I use my all my words today, my ladle to take soup and put it in your bowl. Okay, this is your bowl. This one needs to be kashered inside of a pot. The pot needs to be kashered on the stove. What about this plate that's made out of glass or metal? How do I kasher it? So really, the way you would do it is you would pour boiling water not from the initial source, but from a secondary source onto it. But really, that's just complicated. My recommendation, if you have a dishwasher at home, and your dishwasher has a hot water cycle, make sure your dishes are clean. Not the ones that need a pot, but anything silverware, forks, knives, spoons, plates, bowls. Put them in your dishwasher and run a clean, hot cycle. So no soap. Don't put soap. Soap is a different story. Water. You're basically pouring hot water all over them, but through the dishwasher. And then you don't have to have all that mess on your stovetop, water spilling everywhere, and you've now kashered it. And what about the stuff that was used on the fire? You're not going to have to dunk pots inside of other pots. I say put them in the oven, and then you're able to kasher them in the oven. Make sure your handles don't fall off. But that way you don't have to get in a mess. People get burned every year. One more thing. Things that are used for cold. So let's say this cup. The whole year I only drink cold things in it. Or I can't separate them. Let's say I drink hot things. I don't know what's chametz in your coffee. Let's pretend you drink chametz coffee. I have no idea what kind of coffee you're drinking. You have chametz coffee you dip your cookies into. And of course you do netilat yadayim before you dip your cookies in the coffee, because that's what the Shulchan Aruch says, right? Of course, everybody keeps halacha. Yes? So now, you are afraid that this hot cup of coffee has absorbed chametz. If you want to drink apple juice on Pesach in this cup, does it require kashering? No, because cold never pulls out flavor. If you want to take your chametz pot that you make wacky mac in, and you want to serve apple slices in it, I don't know, you want to take apple slices and put them on the table in a pot. Crazy idea. But you're allowed to do that because cold never transfers flavor, and therefore cold use of chametz utensils is permissible. Things that are used in cold require only simple washing, and that's all that matters. The halakha that I wish to tell you is about glass. Glass does not absorb flavor. It doesn't give off flavor. And because of that, according to the Shulchan Aruch, glass does not require kashering at all. I was at an Asian food store on Wednesday, and I saw this beautiful, it was very expensive, I didn't buy it. A beautiful pot, I don't even know if it works, but it's a pot that it's like you cook, it's a pot like this made out of glass that you could put on your stovetop and cook in it. Now, that looks really cool. That wouldn't require any kashering ever. You can make meat in it on this Thursday night and wash it out, and then Friday morning make dairy in it, chametz dairy, and then wash it out and use it by your seder for chicken soup without kashering it at all. Because glass does not absorb, it doesn't give off flavor, therefore requires no kashering. Ashkenazim were a little more particular about this. I found my ladle. Ashkenazim were more particular, and they believe that for year-round use, you don't have to kasher glass. But between Pesach and the rest of the year, you shouldn't use the same glass. That's a custom. It's not a law. Hara Peretz did not allow me to graduate from his smicha program until I promised him that I would tell Ashkenazim that they can use glass without kashering it also. So I'm telling you that as well right now. But here's my last thing to tell you. I said this in my class in the UK. I ruffled some feathers. It's okay. I don't mind ruffling feathers. If we want to deal with the reality of flavors, the metal that we have today, is it absorbent? Maybe you don't know the scientific answer to this question. Let me ask you this. If you would take this pot, the pot you have in your kitchen, not a cast iron. Cast iron is probably the only metal we still have that absorbs. But a regular stainless steel pot. And you would go to the grocery store. Right behind me there's a grocery store. Sprouts. and you buy the hottest pepper, they told me that the hottest pepper is a ghost pepper. Is that still accurate? Are there hotter peppers than ghost peppers? They don't know either. So if you would go take ghost peppers and you would chop them up with a knife and you would put them inside of this pot and boil them, how long do you want to cook them for? For 2 hours. Let this pot absorb all of that flavor of the ghost peppers. Now you pour the ghost peppers into here to cool down, and you take this pot right away and you wash it with soap and water. And you now fill it up with water again, so you pour your water in and you boil this water. Will you taste the ghost peppers in that water? Absolutely not. And therefore, this pot never became chametz in the first place. My opinion, it's not mine, it's the opinion of Halakha, but Rabbi Peretz was the one who said it out loud first. Harav Dov Lior from Chevron and Kiryat Arba sent out his letter to the Chavurah back in the day, is of the opinion that stainless steel and other high-quality, non-absorbent materials do not require kashering at all. You don't have to wait 24 hours either. I said before about metal that is absorbent. Now I'm telling you that everything I told you until now is almost irrelevant. Because almost all of the utensils in your house are made of high-quality metals that do not absorb flavor. And you have to use your brains. You have to try it. Your cast iron for sure absorbs flavor. The reason people use cast iron is they season it with oils and it gives off flavor. I'm not talking about that. That's the kind of metal that our Chachamim had. The metal, this kind of metal that is smooth to the touch, our Chachamim never knew about. It's not a metal they had. And therefore I'm telling you that metal, stainless steel especially, should be treated like glass. And if you're afraid, I'm going to tell you the truth. In my home, I use glass for meat, milk, and chametz with no kashering in between aside from water and soap. And in my house, I use stainless steel for meat, milk, and chametz without any kashering in between aside from soap and water. I'll reserve an extra seat next to me in hell when we go together. I'm joking, Chava. There's nothing wrong. There's no flavors absorbed. Tam ki ikar. The law is that flavor is what matters, and if there is no flavor, so this imaginary game of utensils absorbing things is ridiculous. So now that you know the rules, let me walk you through all the appliances in your kitchen. I made a list, so let me just read to you off my list so that I don't miss something. Okay, pots. Like I told you, assuming they're not stainless steel, they require hagala in a pot on the fire. Frying pans, the same thing. Baking pans should be put in the oven unless they're used for real chametz. There's a custom, a good custom, not to kasher things that are used for actual baking with flour. It's really hard to clean them. So the step of cleaning them is complicated. Silverware, like I said, in the dishwasher, if it's stainless steel, you don't have to kasher it at all. And the same with serving utensils and cups. Now, skewers they use in the barbecue, if they're made of a material that is absorbent, you put them in the fire. Grills, same thing. Oven, your oven. How do you kasher your oven? People ask me every year how they kasher their oven. An oven cannot become not kasher. Your oven in your kitchen is too big to become not kasher. Maran writes Shulchan Aruch, chapter 108 in Yoreh De'ah, halachot 1, 2, maybe even 3. That I don't want to tell you what he says there. You want to see it yourself, you can blow your own mind on your own. Essentially, an oven doesn't become meat or milk or chametz. If you want, you can clean it out well and let it burn for half an hour. Turn it on 500 for half an hour. Please don't do self-clean. Every year in the Jewish news, someone's house goes up in flames because of the self-clean mode in the oven. It is not safe. For example, if you have pet birds at home, like I do, that will kill your birds, a self-clean method. There's Teflon in your oven, things that when they get that hot, they give off toxic fumes to animals. The other pets could also die from those fumes. When you cook with Teflon cookware, so in my house we don't use Teflon cookware for that reason. If we have something that is Teflon, we cook with it outside, like a rice cooker, because what Teflon does, it releases a gas that the birds breathe, and then their lungs explode inside of them. If you think it's toxic to animals, it's probably also toxic to us, but whatever. Kill yourself all you want. The oven does not require kashering, but if you want, burn it out for half an hour. A microwave. When you heat something up in the microwave, what gets hot in the microwave? The food. And what else? The utensil, right? But really nothing else. The glass tray is glass. It doesn't require kashering. It just needs cleaning. And the walls of the microwave don't actually become chametz. Touch them. They don't get hot. Even they get warm. It's not hot. They don't going to burn your hand. That's the way a microwave works. My father is the one who could explain that better to you than I can. But that's how microwaves work. And so for that reason, all you have to do for a microwave is to clean it out well. With a cleaning agent, make sure it's clean. Now, if you want to be very stringent, you can take a cup of water and let it boil for 2 minutes or 3 minutes there, and let it steam up your microwave. If it makes you feel good, you're welcome to do that. All I ask is be careful with that cup. Those cups are prone to exploding when you take them out of the microwave. So maybe let the cup cool down in the microwave or just skip it all entirely. A toaster for bread slices. I don't know what on earth you would be toasting in your toaster on Pesach. Maybe the gluten-free pancakes from Trader Joe's. Who knows? They're not worth the money, guys. Don't do it. But let's say, so get yourself a new toaster. It's really almost impossible to clean out that toaster. I've tried. You can buy another one for $15 in Target. I haven't managed to ever clean a toaster well enough to kasher it. A blender, check it for cleanliness and wash it well. The easiest way to wash a blender is to put water and soap and let it blend itself. It's a good way to clean a blender. Same thing with a food processor. A coffee maker. There's all kinds of, how do you kasher a coffee maker? You only put coffee in coffee makers, last I checked. Coffee makers that make coffee are not chametz. For those of you who don't eat kitniyot, one day you'll explain to me why a coffee bean is not kitniyot and a garbanzo bean is kitniyot. Hot water urn. What do you use in your hot water urn that makes it chametz? Water and water. And even if on Shabbat you randomly put a challah and an aluminum foil on top of your hot water urn, it was an aluminum foil and it's not there anymore. And if you want, so wash off the lid of your coffee urn. Tea kettle. Tea. Doesn't require kashering. Just wash it well. Storage jars. You keep your little bags of sugar inside of them. It's kasher. It doesn't need anything. Plastic containers. If it's very high quality plastic, you could just wash it well. Or even you want to put it in the dishwasher. If it's a low-grade plastic, like the kind I used to have in yeshiva, where you can smell whatever was inside of it before, don't kasher that one. Just throw it away. Or keep it for after Pesach. Pressure cookers, they require hagalah and a kli rishon. The rubber lining inside also requires hagalah. So drop it in a pot of hot water, or maybe run a clean cycle in there. I don't know to tell you what you should do. A hot plate, a plata, a blech, doesn't require kashering. Clean it well, cover it, or just use it. You can use it the whole year covered aluminum foil anyway, so I don't know really what people are kashering there. Stove tops. How do you kasher stove tops for Pesach? Everybody has an answer to this question. When I ask them the next question, which is, how do you kasher stove tops between meat and milk? We don't. We use the same stove tops for meat and milk. So then why are you kashering your stove top for chametz? The laws of kashrut don't change between meat and milk and Pesach. A little stringencies, but aside from that, nothing more. So you don't have to kasher your stove top. Now if it's glass, that's the best. Glass, you just wipe it down and it's good to go. Metal, like the coils, please don't cover them with foil. First off, that foil rips after a day, and you're only imagining there's foil there. But that foil is dangerous. There are all kinds of heating elements, like the gas ones. There are all kinds of safety sensors. It's very dangerous to cover everything with aluminum foil. What you need to do is clean the stovetop well, and then turn it on for 15 minutes. How long will it take to get so hot that it'll burn your hand? 10 minutes even? 5 minutes? Let it burn out, and then it is good for Pesach. You don't have to do anything else for your stovetop. Sinks. How do I kasher my sink? For Pesach. The same way you kasher your sink for meat and milk. How do you kasher your sink for meat and milk? You don't need a separate sink for meat and milk. There's one sink you need. Maran writes in Shulchan Aruch that you can have dirty dishes and meat dishes all together in the same pot, because meat and milk, once you put soap in that mixture, everything is not real food anyways. Yeah, but let's say you have a sink and people say you should put these plastic liners in your sink. The only thing a plastic insert is good for is collecting bacteria. Aside from that, there's nothing else a plastic insert is good for. Just take your sink and wipe it down. When's the last time you ate out of your sink? I mean, maybe people will tell, what? No, just clean it. You use some soap, Windex, or whatever you do, it's done. Now, you don't eat out of your sink. You don't cook in your sink. There's no reason to kasher your sink. Dishwasher.
But Rabbi,
Yeah.
it depends what your sink made out of.
No, it doesn't matter, because your sink, you don't eat from it, so why didn't you kasher it?
But if it's porcelain, can you kasher it?
You don't need, I'm saying that a sink doesn't need kashering, so it doesn't matter what it was used with. Yep.
Okay.
Now a dishwasher. A dishwasher can be kashered very simply. Run one cycle through it with soap so that everything gets cleaned and everything in there is pagum, is blemished by the soap. And then run a clean cycle to make sure that it's clean. Fun fact, Chacham Ovadia Yosef was of the opinion that you can use your same dishwasher for meat and milk, not just one after the next, but you put all the utensils together and add dishwashing soap, that's totally fine, and I am in agreement. Countertops, I get this question every year. How do I kasher my countertop? I have a granite countertop, I have a tile countertop, I have what's the plastic one called? Formica countertop, whatever it's going to be. All of those things don't require kashering. Now, Maran Shulchan Aruch says that countertops and tables require kashering. So how am I arguing with Maran? Very simple. Maran's countertops and tabletops are not our countertops and tabletops. In Maran's world, a table is something you eat off of. You ever seen a Middle Eastern family or a Far East family? You sit around the table, the food is there, everyone eats with their hands. That table is really a plate. Our tables are Maran's floor. You put a pot on the floor, does it make the floor chametz? No. And so there's no reason in the world for you to have to kasher your countertop, your tabletop either. Now tell me the scenario. But Rabbi, sometimes I put food on my countertop. When's the last time you took a boiling hot brisket, slapped it down on your countertop and sliced? Oh, but Rabbi, I have one special countertop, stainless steel I use for cutting meat. Okay, well, that's stainless steel. And even if not, let me give you an example. I take my pot, Rabbi, and the wacky mac jumped out of the pot and landed on the counter and was burning hot. Yes, I agree. That happens sometimes. Food falls on the countertop. That's right. Now you're assuming your countertop absorbed all that flavor of the wacky mac. Let's assume that you have a very absorbent countertop, which if you did, you'd never really be able to keep it clean. Let's pretend it's absorbent. If you ever had stone floors that require special treatment, you'll realize that none of your countertops are really absorbent. Now it's absorbed flavor of my wacky mac. Now give me the scenario in which it's going to make something chametz. Within 24 hours, are you going to make chicken soup and have a matzah ball drop directly on the same exact spot the wacky mac fell yesterday and pull out that flavor into the matzah ball? Is it going to happen? Never. And so you don't have to kasher your countertops. If you go to someone's house and you see that there's aluminum foil on their countertops, you should not eat in their house. Why? I agree. Why should you not eat in their house? I'll tell you very simply. Because it is obvious they are the people who wear 2 masks with a face protector. They don't know what they're afraid of. There is no rational reason for why you are covering your countertop, which tells me that you don't know what chametz is. And I can only eat in someone's house if I know they keep the laws of Pesach. And if you don't know what chametz is, then how can I trust that you didn't put chametz in my food? It shows ignorance when someone puts a layer of aluminum foil or contact paper or whatever else it is. That is entire ignorance of halakha. Don't do it. Please don't do it. Harav Peres once came home and he found aluminum foil on all his countertops. And he asked his wife, tell me, did you cover it for halakha or because you like the way it looks? She knows the answer. His wife has been married to him for a long time. He said, Rabbi, not for halakha, of course not. You don't need to cover your countertops. I like the way it looks. So, decorating the house, that's not my jurisdiction. You can do whatever you want to decorate the house. She's a smart lady. Tables, same thing. You don't have to kasher your tables. My father spent his childhood sanding down the wooden chairs and tables every Pesach. I guess your table gets thinner as the years go on. Mixing bowls, wash them. Crock pot. I'm not answering that question. Rolling pins. Get ones if you're making matzot, get your own rolling pins for Pesach. Drying racks where you put your dishes, they don't need to be kashered. Chargers, you know what chargers are? They're those like plates they put under the plate that you can't eat of because if you flip them over, they say known to the state of California to contain chemicals that cause cancer. Yes, I don't know why they're on people's tables in the first place. Yeah, they're fancy. They like the plate you don't eat from. So then it doesn't need kashering. Just wipe them down to make sure there's no chametz there. My refrigerator and my freezer. How do I kasher a refrigerator and a freezer? Why are you kashering a refrigerator and a freezer? There's no heat. Just clean it out. What if I want to line it with all that special Pesach paper that's as good for Pesach? If you line your fridge with paper or contact paper or aluminum foil, you're actually going to hurt your refrigerator. The refrigerator relies on a certain amount of airflow to go through the fridge to keep things cold. Your food will spoil, the fan will break, something will happen. Please don't cause yourself unnecessary financial damage on Pesach. Just clean everything. And just like you don't have separate shelves for meat and milk, I once said that in a class and said, but I do have separate shelves for meat and milk. Okay, we're in the generation that kashers teeth. Remember that. Just like you don't have separate shelves for meat and milk, you don't need to have separate shelves for chametz and non. It's all kasher. Yes. I think at this point in time, I have covered almost everything I wanted to cover. I want to run through one last. Medications, anything that is swallowed does not need to be kasher le Pesach. Swallowing is not an act of eating on Pesach, and one is allowed to swallow food, especially if it's a medication. So please don't go to those lists and stop taking your heart medication. I need you to survive, please, until the end of Pesach. Don't listen to the ones that are trying to kill you, please. Toothpaste doesn't really need to be kasher le Pesach. A dog wouldn't eat toothpaste, but I understand why somebody would want to be strict. It goes in your mouth. Yeah, fine. Most of the toothpaste don't have chametz in them anyway, so it's not really an issue. It's just a theoretical conversation. Cosmetics. You do not need kasher le Pesach deodorant. You don't need it. You don't need kasher le Pesach face powders. You're not eating that. I mean, if you're eating it, you have a different problem. Cleaning agents. Which Windex is kasher le Pesach? Mr. Clean, oven tile cleaner. If you are drinking Windex from the bottle, you need help. And I'm happy to find a person who will help you. My wife is a therapist. I'm happy to connect you to the right person. I'm not mocking anybody who actually drinks Windex because that's a problem they have. But the Jewish agencies make it seem like people are downing bottles of palm olive soap and they need to know which ones are kosher or not. It's really a terrifying thing. All of the cleaning utensils in the world are kasher. Yes? Very good. Shoe polish. People have shoe polish. I've seen the most unusual things. Salt, sugar. As long as they're just salt and sugar, they're fine. Coffee, tea. Dried fruits that don't have flour in them. So there are dried fruits, like some oats that they roll them in flour. Figs, they roll them in flour. That's obviously chametz. But something just a dried fruit, it's just a dried fruit. There's nothing to worry about. I once said that, and a rabbi told me, well, we once inspected a factory of dates in Palm Springs, California. Yes? And we have our kosher for Passover side of the factory and the non-kosher for Passover. Yes? And we went to inspect the air conditioning vents. And we found some residual flour from one room in the air conditioning vents. And so how do you know that when we're drying the kosher for Passover dates, it's not being sprinkled with the flour from the other room? Yeah, people have good imaginations. But it still doesn't make it a halachic concern in terms of kashrut. Before I leave you, I have a request. And that is that if you don't have my book, I'm happy to get you a copy. But Marlene is going out of town. So anybody who's ordering a book after today is not going to be shipped, right?
The latest day would be Tuesday, Wednesday.
Order a book by tonight or else it's not going to be shipped out, please. Yes, that's going to be my deadline. I'm going to close the form tomorrow morning until you get back. That way we don't have any overload of orders. If you cannot get my book that fast, I will send you the chapter on the laws of yashan. Before I let you go, I want to just share with you a halakha that's very important. It's important because nobody keeps it. Nobody keeps it, and then I'll do a Q&A for the laws of Pesach. Yes? So, yashan is as follows. The Torah says in the book of Vayikra, chapter 24. Don't think I know the whole Tanakh by heart. I wish I did, but that's my bar mitzvah parsha. Velechem vekali vecharmel lo tochelu ad etzem hayom hazeh. All kinds of grains, of the 5 grains, you cannot eat until this day. Which day? Ad deviachem et korban Elohechem, until you offer the Omer offering in the Beit HaMikdash. When do we begin offering the Omer offering in the Beit HaMikdash? When do you start counting the Omer? On the second night of Pesach. The second night of Pesach and onward, all of the grains that we were keeping in our storehouses, because there's a biblical prohibition to eat them until we offer the Omer offering, we are now able to eat them on the second night of Pesach, or outside of Israel on the third night of Pesach, because we keep 2 days of the first day. And we offer the Omer offering up until Shavuot. There's a reason for the Omer offering. And it was a celebration. Ramban writes in Vayikra that the Omer was a time of celebration. I wrote an article once, it was published somewhere, I don't remember where even it was published, that it's so sad to see that a time period which was biblically a holiday has turned into this late custom of mourning during the Omer. It's unusual how the Torah viewed the status of the Omer like Chol HaMoed between Pesach and Shavuot. And today it's the time of weeping and mourning and crying. It's unbelievable. To me, when I see things like Yom HaAtzmaut or Yom Yerushalayim pop up in the calendar, and there are days that we now celebrate in the Omer, it makes me very happy. Like we're reclaiming a Kadosh Baruch Hu's calendar for days of celebration in the middle of what everybody else is busy mourning on. But practically, this halakha does not only apply to the Jewish people living in the land with the temple. So the parasha does say, when you come to the land, meaning this mitzvah starts, not in Egypt, but when the Jewish people first arrive in the land. And how long, where does it apply? L'dorotechem, b'chol moshvotechem. in all of your generations, anywhere that you live. Those words mean something in a legal Jewish context. The Dorotechem means whether there's a temple or there's no temple, whether there's a sacrifice or no sacrifice, this law still applies. B'chol mashvotechem, anywhere that you live, that means anywhere that you live. Whether you live in Israel, whether you live outside of Israel, it doesn't matter. This law applies. That means, listen to me very carefully. If you have a cookie, and this cookie is made out of wheat flour, and it has a kosher symbol on it, and that kosher symbol, like 99% of the kosher symbols, don't care about the laws of yashan, you, by eating that cookie, will be violating a biblical prohibition that is worse than eating a salami and cheese sandwich. Because a salami and cheese sandwich is only rabbinically prohibited. You know this halakha, right? It's only prohibited when you cook them together. But when you eat them together, it's rabbinically prohibited. So eating a cookie with a kosher symbol, flour that is still new flour, meaning the holiday of Pesach has not passed over it, is a biblical prohibition. Now, are there rabbis who argue? Of course, and I've refuted every one of their arguments in my book, not me, but the Chachamim. The Rambam writes one must keep the laws of Yashan. Maran writes one must keep the laws of Yashan. All of a sudden I have a Jewish community that wants to follow Shulchan Aruch for everything. We want to have gelatin, we want to eat citric acid on Pesach from chametz, we want to have all the kitniyot in the world, we want everything. Comes time to observe the laws of Yashan, we rely on some heter that came from some village in Eastern Europe somewhere. Why? Why not follow halakha properly? And so I'm asking you, even if you are Ashkenazi, you want to eat kitniyot, do everything you want on Pesach. Just make sure you observe the laws of Yashan. If you live in a big Jewish community, likely you can buy things that are Yashan the whole year. If you're like us, you might need to save up and stock up in a freezer things that are Yashan. If you don't know what Yashan is, but you want to learn more, I will send out a PDF, B'ezrat Hashem, to anybody who reaches out to me. Send me an email, rabbi@shiviti.org, and I will respond with a PDF of the chapter on the laws of Yashan, and I will personally be here to help you take on this precious mitzvah to make sure that you're actually eating proper foods according to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah. And if you're worried so much about all of these rabbinic stringencies on Pesach, then I hope that you also will be worried about all the biblical stringencies that during the year, basic requirements, not stringencies. At this point in time, I want to wish everybody a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a happy Pesach. I will do a formal Q&A of all kinds of things during Chol HaMoed, like I do every year on live and a live class. And I would love to have you participate in that. A link will go out later this week, letting you know about that. Right now, I will stay here to answer any Pesach-related questions. I will be here for as long as you possibly need me. I'm not rushing anywhere. I'm here to answer your questions. If there's anything I don't answer today or you have to run, you're welcome to submit it as a private post on the Pesach Kashrut forum online. Thank you so much for learning with Torah with me. I'll tell you, it's before the holiday of Pesach. I've had the most unbelievable winter learning with all of you. The people, those of you who watch live, those of you who join in person, those of you who listen to the classes on YouTube or podcasts, and those of you who this might be your first time and hopefully you'll come back again. It's a zechut to be able to learn Torah with you. It gives me, whenever I look at people saying you need to kasher your teeth, and then I look at a group of people like you who know instinctively that that's not the Judaism that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us, it gives me reason to keep teaching Torah. You are the only reason that I keep doing what I do. And so I'm grateful to every single one of you. I'm grateful for learning with me. I'm grateful for your friendship with me. And I'm extending an invitation to come join us in San Diego. If it's for Pesach, if it's for Shabbat, if it's for Shavuot, if it's for a summer, don't wait. Who knows how long we're going to be in San Diego for, Cheva. We never know where the world is going to take us. So for right now, make it a plan. My wife and I would be honored to roll out the red carpet for you and your family. And until then, I'm wishing you all a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. If there's anything you want to ask privately, you're also welcome to reach out privately. And really, if I haven't had a chance to have a private conversation with you before, I really would love to connect personally with you, each one of you and your families. And so I wish you again a happy Pesach, and God willing, we'll meet this Friday night in Yerushalayim Bir HaKodesh on Har HaBayit. B'ezrat Hashem.